So today we're going to be discussing happy marriage, happy family, creating a positive home environment. Although here at Camry, we do not focus on couples counseling, any family counseling agency or anyone who works with families will tell you that having positivity in the home and having, if it is a two-parent home, that having those parents in a marriage or a partnership where they can communicate well and be happy for the most part is obviously going to positively affect the child or children in the home. The purpose of this group. So the content of this group is based in the couples counseling theory of John Gottman. In presenting ideas of how to create happy marriages, we hope that we can create a marriage and a home dynamic that's in a positive sentiment override. And I think we'll discuss that a little bit more later. This means that families communicate from a place of positivity rather than of negativity. I myself am trained, a level 1 trained Gottman couples counselor, but I don't actively do couples counseling. So a lot of what I'm going to be discussing here today is based in my knowledge of clinical counseling and working with families, especially families with young children. But again, if you want to take these concepts, I highly recommend grabbing his book, which I'll be discussing throughout the group, or going to see a couples counselor who might be able to do some of this stuff in a little bit more depth. So John Gottman, if you're not familiar with him, this is a picture of him with his wife, I believe her name's Julie. They do a lot of their work together. He was one of the first psychologists to not only empirically study couples, but was one of the first to obtain a really high correlation rate, which sort of added to the value of what he was studying. We knew these numbers meant something. Within 5 minutes of watching a couple in a lab, Gottman was able to predict with 91% accuracy which couples would eventually divorce. And his guessing was not based in instinct, but rather based in his research findings. There was actually certain things that he was looking for, and when he saw those things, he was able to predict whether or not that couple would divorce. And so the group today is based on his book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. You can pick up the book and get all the same information, but I know a lot of people don't have time to read a whole book. And if you're like me, I prefer to listen and have some slides and be able to see the material presented in a different way. So problem solving and active listening. So before, and even to this date, many forms of couples therapy would focus on solving problems and teaching active listening. And what Gottman's research concluded was that successful conflict resolution, which is just solving problems, is not actually what makes marriages succeed. One of his most surprising findings was that most couples in successful marriages rarely use active listening skills when they're upset because emotions are just so high. Some of the myths about marriage that are still prevalent today that his research sort of opposed, I should say, was that neuroses or personality problems were in marriages. In fact, most people deal with some sort of mental health issue. And what matters more is finding someone that has a personality that meshes and matches with yours. One other myth is that common interests keep you together. It's not about the activities that you do together and whether you mutually enjoy them, but rather how you conduct yourself during any activity. Are you kind no matter what? Quid pro quo, do for me and I do for you is actually a marker for unhappy marriages. If you're actually happy and positive in a marriage, you usually don't need to keep track of whose turn it is to do the dishes. Another myth is that avoiding conflict will either save or ruin your marriage. No one style of conflict is necessarily better than the other, as long as the style works for both people. And so the way that you communicate and argue stylistically, as long as that matches, it can help a marriage work. Another big myth is that affairs are the root cause of divorce. In most cases, it's the other way around. A bad marriage is what makes the partner more likely to cheat. In couples who divorced after an affair, only 27% reported that it was actually the affair itself that caused the separation. Most couples stated that growing apart or not feeling loved and appreciated was the primary reason. Another myth is that men and women are from different planets. Gender differences can contribute to marital problems, but they don't cause them. In both men and women, the determining factor in whether or not they feel satisfied with sex, romance, passion in their marriage was by the quality of the couple's friendship, and that was by 70% of the people. The last one is that men are not biologically built for marriage. Although the belief is that men are not suited for monogamy, it was found that affairs and growing apart were actually caused more by opportunity. And we saw this when women started entering the workforce and the percentage of female affairs actually skyrocketed. And if the numbers are still the same, I think from what I've learned that affairs are usually equal from men and women. It's not just men going out and having an affair, as I think some people are led to believe. So the basis for a happy marriage, there's 7 principles that are based on creating a deep friendship in couples and learning how to argue and disagree. But first, how is divorce predicted? So there's 6 major signs that, that a relationship might be failing. These signs don't come from the couple's arguments themselves or not the content of the argument, but rather in the way that the couple actually argues. So the first predictor of divorce was the harsh startup in an argument. When discussions begin or immediately become negative and accusatory, that's what we would call a harsh startup. Research shows that 96% of the time you can predict the outcome of a conversation based on the first 3 minutes of a 15-minute or more interaction. And that's because most conversations end however they began. If you begin a discussion with a harsh startup, you may as well pull the plug and start over at a different time. You may have heard this term, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and Gottman sort of coined this as one of the predictors for divorce. And the 4 horsemen are criticism, which is a global complaint about your partner's character or their personality, and being used in an argument. Contempt is when one comes from a place of feeling superior to the other, and it's done to demean and it conveys disgust. Defensiveness is an effort to defend oneself, where you place the blame on your partner. And stonewalling is where we avoid fighting and the person's non-confrontational. It's and is essentially tuned out. And it doesn't seem to care. They don't seem to care about what their partner is saying. And here it's saying that it's usually the husband that's doing this in 85% of the cases. And I've thrown a little video in here that I thought summed up, and it's from the Gottman Institute itself, that sums up the 4 horsemen, and I thought it described it a lot better than I can.
You're so selfish.
What an idiot.
It's not my fault we're always late.
Forget it.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following 4 research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first 3 horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the 4 horsemen by visiting our site.
And so continuing on, another predictor of divorce is flooding. People generally stonewall as a result of feeling flooded. Flooding means that your partner's negativity is so overwhelming and sudden that it leaves you a little bit shell-shocked. You feel attacked by your partner, and therefore you decide to disengage or stonewall. Another predictor is body language. Most commonly when someone's feeling flooded, psychological signs during arguments occur, such as high blood pressure, increased heart rate, secretion of adrenaline, leading to fight or flight response. The ability to remain calm during a disagreement is vital in a long-lasting relationship. And evolutionary speaking, this ability to remain calm and not feel flooded tends to be easier for women. Just on this note, with the high blood pressure and increased heart rate, I know sometimes in the past when I've done family counseling, we would have family members put on a heart rate monitor. And if the heart rate monitor detected that it got above a certain number, whatever their base level was, we'd sort of measure them for a base level at the beginning, and they would have to disengage in the discussion. So, and then they weren't welcome to rejoin the family discussion until their heart rate had been lowered. And so what it did was teach them that it's not healthy to engage in an argument when everything's escalated in their body. But at the same time, if they wanted to rejoin the conversation, they needed to build and learn skills in order to calm themselves. So a lot of parents and children were sitting there learning deep breathing techniques if they had to go do some yoga, doing whatever they needed to do to get their heart rate down so that they could re-engage. Another predictor of divorce is failed repair attempts. Repair attempts are efforts the couple makes to de-escalate the tension during a touchy discussion, to put on the brakes so that flooding is prevented. In newlyweds who were high on the 4 horsemen but made repair attempts, 84% reported happy marriages after 6 years. So I think what they're trying to say here is that the repair attempts, even if the 4 horsemen are high, are very valuable and a very great strategy for sort of moving the couple forward and figuring out how to reconnect again. Predicting divorce, bad memories is the last one. When a relationship is in negative sentiment override, not only are current comments being taken negatively, but even recollections of past events are being remembered more negatively. In happy marriages, we're more likely to interpret behavior more positively. And I think most of us have been in this situation where you're already in an irritable mood and you'll tend to take everything that's going on as something negative. And in those moods, you may even remember past events as being negative. So what are the 7 principles for making a marriage work? These are them here, and I'm going to be going into each of them in slightly more detail. Enhancing your love map. So emotionally intelligent couples are those that are intimately familiar with their partners and their partner's world, which is called a richly detailed love map. 67% of couples decrease in marriage satisfaction after the birth of their first baby, and the remaining 33% in the remaining 33%, satisfaction remained the same or improved. And of that 33%, it was found that all of those couples had detailed love maps from the beginning of the relationship. Love maps can be a little bit more complicated to get into. I will be trying to link or send out some paperwork that shows how to create those love maps. I do believe if you go onto the Gottman Institute website, you can download some of those. And there's also a Gottman app where you can actually do tests with your partner to create love maps, or I shouldn't say tests, but with little questionnaires you can answer to create love maps together. It's a little bit time consuming, but it's quite a fun activity to do together and really helps you to reconnect. The second principle is to nurture fondness and admiration. Couples' fondness and admiration system is a fundamental sense that the other person is worthy of being respected and liked. It's usually detectable by asking a couple to recall their past. So I think in one of Gottman's studies, he would ask the couple to recall how they first started dating. And if they recalled it with love and positivity and fondness, then that was his indication that their admiration system was functioning and quite well. Whereas the opposite would be if they remembered it quite poorly, or they argued about what happened, or just had sort of a negative connotation, then it might be an indication that the admiration system needs some work or isn't quite there. It's seen as an antidote to contempt. So if you remain fond of your partner, you're less likely to respond in disgust when you disagree. The next one is turning toward each other. Gottman believes that couples have an emotional bank account, and the account is filled with an emotional savings. When things are good, so that rough patches, the account is filled with emotional savings when things are good, so that the rough patches, when they hit, it provides a cushion and something for the couples that they can draw from to get through. One way to fill this account is to turn toward your partner, is a term that Gottman uses when emotional bids are made. So a bid is a way that one partner tries to engage the other. And these are usually really small ways, like commenting on the weather, and turning towards them is when the other partner responds by engaging back. And so we've all seen those couples that will accept an emotional bid, but also ones that are really reactive, and maybe the other partner will say, "Why are you asking me that right now?" And they'll say, "Oh, I was just trying to, start a discussion." But they're in that negative sentiment override. So even the simplest bid is being interpreted negatively. Turning away or turning against implies that there's no response or an aggressive response to the bid. So the fourth one is letting your partner influence you. Couples who accept influence and listen to their partner's requests from the beginning of the relationship are more likely to stay happily married. The importance is placed on an equal balance of power sharing. So generally, it's more difficult for men to give away their power, making them less likely than women to accept influence. The wives of men who accept influence are far less likely to be harsh with their husbands when broaching a difficult marital topic. This increases the odds that the marriage will survive. So there's generally two kinds of marital conflict. One is resolvable, which is at some point where you'll be able to come to an agreement or resolution. And the other is perpetual, which comprises almost 70% of marital conflict, and will likely be a part of your lives forever, or if not for a very long time, in one form or another. And so an example of a perpetual one is maybe that one partner wants children, one doesn't. That's something that's not likely to get resolved. And so it could be an argument that you're fighting over a lot for many years. Despite what others tell you, you don't have to resolve your major marital conflicts in order for your marriage to thrive. I love this quote, so I threw this one in here, but when choosing a long-term partner, you will inevitably be choosing a particular set of unsolvable problems that you'll be grappling with for the next 10, 20, or 50 years. I get a lot of people asking me about relationships and whether or not they could be married to someone where you keep having the same fights. And I think what this is telling us is that that's inevitable in every relationship, that you will keep having the same fights. It's more about what you're fighting about and whether or not you can continue to have that fight. And I think the example of not wanting to have children is a great one, because for someone that may be a deal breaker and they don't want to have to fight with their partner every day for the next 10 years. About whether or not they can have kids. And so they may need to step away from that relationship because it's a perpetual problem that they're not willing to engage with or to keep having. But most of those perpetual problems are ones that we may argue about forever. I know mine with my husband's is my husband is very tight with his money, and I probably spend a little bit more than I should, and I can be wasteful at times with my money. And so it's a fight that we've had for the past 15 years of being together. It doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, but I think with each passing year, we find some way to meet in the middle. And so it's really just about how you deal with those perpetual problems, I think, that really matters. Gridlock is it's where in unstable marriages, perpetual problems eventually kill the relationship. Instead of coping with the problem effectively, the couples become gridlocked over it. They have the same argument over and over, and there's never any resolution, and it doesn't end well, and it ends with a lot of negativity. The fifth one of the 7 principles is to solve your solvable problems. So softening your startup, which means approaching the other person kindly and devoid of contempt or criticism, making repair attempts when things start up harshly or become overwhelming and negative. Making a repair attempt can relieve the tension or lighten the mood. And it's important to receive repair attempts as well. Soothing yourself and each other, finding a way to calm down and relax in the middle of a heated argument. Compromising, being open to accepting influence from your partner, and being tolerant of each other's faults. Conflict resolution is not about one person changing, it's about negotiating and finding common ground and ways that you can accommodate each other. The sixth principle is to overcome gridlock. The goal in ending gridlock is not to solve the problem, but rather to move from gridlock to dialogue, to talk about the issue without hurting each other. Often behind perpetual problems is that individuals have dreams and goals and they don't align with their partner. And the seventh and final principle is just to create shared meaning. Marriage is more than just taking care of kids and splitting chores, sex, etc. It can also have a spiritual dimension that has to do with creating an inner life together, a rich culture with symbols and rituals, and an appreciation for your roles and goals that link you and that led you to understand what it means to be part of the family that you've become. So Gottman suggests that you can improve your marriage with the better use of just 5 hours a week together. So one of the first ones he suggests is partings, making sure you say goodbye when you part. And that can only, that totals up to maybe 10 minutes a week, but it's an important 10 minutes. And related to that is reunion, engaging in stress reducing conversations at the end of every day. I think that's supposed to say 20 minutes per day. Admiration and appreciation. Find a way every day to communicate genuine affection and appreciation. Affection, kissing, holding, grabbing, touching, making sure to kiss before you go to bed, and having a weekly date. Try to have a portion of this time set aside for talking about low stress topics. I don't think this was created for parents with really young children. And having a 3 and 5-year-old myself, I can kind of read through these with a little bit of a laugh, saying I don't even know where I would find the time for some of this stuff. But I don't think it's saying you need to do all these things all the time. This is the ideal. It doesn't always happen. My partner and I really try to have, a good party, making sure we always say goodbye to each other. And when each of us comes home at the end of the day, if we've been working or whatever, we do try to reconnect. And it might be that we're talking for that 20 minutes over screaming children, but at least we're talking. And are the 20 minutes happening all at once? Probably not. It's probably 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. But all of these things, if you can try it, try it. Having a weekly date is generally out of the question. We don't have a lot of extra help. And so one of the things we do is just once a week after we put the kids to bed, we make a point to watch a movie together or do something together, play a board game, Scrabble, but it's whatever it needs to be. It doesn't mean we have to go out and spend money or go on a date or go buy dinner. It could just mean that we've set that time aside to actually spend it together and do something that helps us reconnect. The marital poop detector. It sounds bad, but most marital dissatisfaction comes from unrealistic expectations of your partner. So I don't know if it's a blanket statement to try to lower your expectations, but maybe take a look at your expectations and see whether or not they're realistic. And so the marital poop detector idea is really just a way of catching marital problems before they become big problems by saying something like, this doesn't smell right. So the idea is to give the couple an opportunity to discuss issues while they're still small. So if you do catch issues while they're small, make sure you bring them up and talk about them before they become big. So for some extra resources, like I said, I'm going to be trying to send out a handout with the 4 horsemen and their antidotes. The 4 horsemen, it can be a hard concept to understand. And so it is really helpful to get on the Gottman website, take a look at the handout. You can even just Google it. And I usually Google something like the 4 horsemen antidotes or the 4 horsemen examples. And you can come up with a better idea of what those look like. Handout with questionnaires. I've got some extra questionnaires that come from the Gottman work. Some that I've grabbed online just to get an idea of some of the questionnaires that Gottman uses, and that includes some of the love map questions. I hope they still exist. I forgot to double check. But at least a couple of years ago, there were some Gottman apps, and you can use these with your partner. I do not recall if they cost money. I think they may have, but they can help you work on love maps, having open-ended questions, fun and play, giving appreciation, affection, and love. So they work on some of the materials that this presentation has gone through today. And then the book with the 7 principles that this group is based on. It's always great to have a copy of that and read through it if that's something that interests you. And thank you for joining us. If you want more information on this topic or any of our other services, please feel free to give us a call at 604-436-9449 or email us at one of the provided email addresses here. And thanks again for coming.